Hey friends, welcome back to the School Transportation Nation podcast. This week, I'm Tony Corbin, the publisher of School Transportation News. This episode is brought to you by Transfinder, the leader in school bus routing software. Our tech tip is brought to you by Zonar, and our safety tip is brought to you by Safety Vision.
I'm back, everybody. Ryan Gray here, editor-chief at School Transportation News. Took last week off. Thanks to my associate, Taylor Hannon, for doing a bang-up job, as usual, as my replacement. Thanks for joining us. We got a great guest on this episode, Terry Penn, Director of Transportation at Rockwall Independent School District in Texas. Stay tuned to hear how he's prepping his bus fleet for school startup.
All right, guys, we got to measure this. I need to see emails from all our listeners. You know, we got to vote. Do you like Taylor or do you like Ryan on the podcast? There's got to be a competition here. Taylor did such a great job last week. It was a lot of fun having her on. I want to see emails from you guys. If you loved hearing from Taylor, we're probably going to bring her back on. But if we don't get any emails, we're not going to know how much you guys loved her. So please send us some emails at info@stnmedia.com. We'd love to hear from you.
I feel like we can set up an app where you can swipe left or swipe right for us. Maybe we can get that going.
We could, Ryan. I think that could be possible. Maybe we could set up a poll on the stnonline.com website. We can have, do you like Taylor? Do you like Ryan? Do you like both? Maybe something like that.
Yeah, I think we could look into that.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. Well, you know, Ryan's been busy. He was on vacation, lounging on a beach somewhere, maybe with a Mai Tai. Where'd you go, Ryan? Where'd you disappear to?
I went to Las Vegas and then to see family, do some errands at home as well. So nothing too fun, but you got to do what you got to do. So.
Well, Viva Las Vegas. You didn't go into the casinos and try a little roulette or, roll the dice a little bit? Nothing like that?
I might have stopped by one out in like Henderson, one of those the hotel casinos out there. I might have, dropped a couple quarters in a slot machine or something, just to make sure it works. All
work and no play makes Ryan a dull boy. So we loved having you back, man. And we've been busy over here at STN. We have some news for you, right? Like breaking news. We have decided to, unfortunately, pull the plug on our STN Expo Indianapolis /TSD conference that were both rescheduled to later in October with the rash of increased coronavirus. And based on a recent NASDIP's press release of canceling their conference, they cited that state directors, in many states were not allowing out-of-state travel. So it was just in the best interest for us to go ahead and make the move. We are going to transition to virtual training. It's all the rage right now, and STN is preparing for our Bus Technology Summit, but we also are going to be doing the virtual TSD conference. More to come on that. We're shooting for late October. Ryan, I've seen this big move towards virtual. I mean, where's your head at? We're going to see a lot of attendees. We're doing webinars about this stuff. What are you seeing out there?
I would imagine I'm forecasting that we should have some good attendance for these things. Certainly with our webinars, as you mentioned, we've gotten some great participation over the last couple months, especially last week we had Patrick Mulick on board, and a lot of our audience knows him from STN Expo Reno or TSD conference. He joined us for re-engaging students with disabilities on the bus during COVID-19. Of course, Patrick is an autism expert, a certified child behavior expert as well. So he was on there and really talking about, especially children with autism behavioral disorders, what needs to happen on the bus, what student transporters need to do to, like I said, re-engage them. We've read so much in the press about when schools went to virtual learning in the spring that a lot of students with disabilities were left behind because they're not used to learning outside of the classroom environment. So as hard as it was to transition for teachers and students in quote unquote general education, it was even more arduous of a task for these students. So you have a lot of things where you have a lot of nonverbal kids. You have a lot of kids, of course, with different health conditions. And, continuity is important. for children in general, but more so for students with disabilities. So Patrick joined us and really gave some good thoughts and perspective over about an hour and a half last week. We had over 600 pre-register for it, nearly 700 attend. When we were going to press, as they say with this podcast, we were over 1,000. So just looking at that, looking at a webinar in July that we had done with our passenger safety technician experts on addressing COVID-19 child passenger safety challenges. We had about that many at the live event, and I think it was nearly 1,300 last I looked that have actually viewed that webinar. So certainly a lot of people, they're hungry for information, right? Everything under the sun that's in-person events has been canceled this year. Weddings are being held in people's backyards with just like the in-laws and the parents and the dog. It's really decimated the wedding industry. Obviously, any events right now are suffering. So everything has gone to this virtual land. And I think that over the summer, even people that were maybe technologically averse, they had to jump into Zoom meetings, go-to meetings, those kind of things. So it's just been this natural progression that we've seen a lot of folks as they're struggling with their back-to-school operations. They're hungry for information. Their state association conference was canceled. NAPT canceled their conference earlier this year. NASDIPS, as you mentioned, canceled theirs. We've had to push back our conferences, and now it's just not tenable, as you said. So I think that, we are just in that environment now where everyone's used to being online. We've been locked at home for months. The only way we can communicate with our staff and our coworkers is via web chats and whatnot. So, this is the new normal. And we're here. We're moving forward. We're learning as we go. But I think we'll have some great content for everybody to digest here this fall.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan, all well, we've been unpacking this idea of virtual conferences and how to provide training to our reading audience. STN has, 26,000 readers a month at our magazine, and we've got over 30,000 people we communicate by email. And our website draws, it's over 150,000 unique visitors a month, roughly. And we're getting between 350 and 500,000 page views. So people are really actively engaged with us in the digital environment. And we're really seeing this progression towards consuming content to prep for this school startup amid all these challenges. And really everybody wants to hear use cases of what others are doing. And I think, as school starts in person in some places, we're really going to hear some great stories and lessons learned. Should we or shouldn't we do these things, or what are the proper procedures? And we'll be there to follow all those stories and information. And I think one of the big things for us, Ryan, as we were discussing, we don't want to do a conference that's a Zoom meeting or a webinar. We already do that, right? So what are we going to bring that's different to the table? And we really searched many, many different platforms that were out there. And really the key thing that I wanted to provide to everybody, as is important, is that peer-to-peer networking component. And really one fabulous component of the software we're using is the ability to connect people together in chats, video. It also has a really crazy feature that it randomizes all the people in the room and matches you up with other people you don't know. So you're meeting new people, kind of like you would at a live conference. I mean, it's never going to be exactly the same. You're not going to be able to get a beer with somebody or go hang out, do something fun. But this is going to be kind of a virtual experience, and it's all new to everybody. And we're drinking from the fire hose. And I think many companies that I've talked to that have products that would be physical demonstration product that you need to touch and feel, they're like, what do we do? How do we share this with all your readers? And, it really comes down to maybe making video content and really sharing that through different mediums. So it's a whole new world in how we communicate and how we consume information and products, just like this podcast, right? New and exciting for everybody. Some of you might be new listeners. Some of you might be old listeners that have been on to us for the last 21 episodes now. This is our 21st. So yeah, we love doing this and innovating as a company. So it's exciting stuff, Ryan.
Yeah, we just got the ability to vote a few weeks ago, and now we can go out and grab a drink. That's amazing how time flies.
There you go. Well, Ryan, I want to dive into it a little bit. There's been a little bit of a bright light. The economy is chugging along. How's that affecting student transportation right now?
Well, when AMC announces that they're going to be opening their movie theaters, at least in 100 locations across the U.S. on August 20th, that's got to be good news, right? And the fact that I saw in an article that I read on opening day, it's going to be 15 cents to see a movie. So that's going back to 1920 when the company first opened its first theaters in KC, Kansas City. But I was thinking they're reducing their prices. Obviously, it's a great marketing ploy and they're kind of going back 100 years and whatnot. But I thought, could we maybe be seeing this from school bus purchases? We know that we've been talking to a lot of readers over the summer and asking them what their purchase outlook appears to be amid COVID and all the budget crunches and stuff. And a lot of folks are saying they're not going to be purchasing as many buses. Some are plugging away and they're staying the course. Others not so much. So lo and behold, Bluebird came out with their third quarter financial results last week. And they announced that COVID-19, quote unquote, significantly impacted their results. President and CEO Phil Orlock commented that school shutdowns and shelter-in-place mandates delayed a lot of school bus orders and continued supplier disruptions. But he did sound a note of positivity, pointing out in a call with investors that the company financial position remains strong. The focus going forward is margin growth. And that's kind of a key word there. Again, I get back to reducing prices. Not to say that there's going to be a big fire sale going on out there, but it will be interesting to see as we move into the fall amid the reduction in capacity, school districts and bus companies needing to utilize their buses, multiple tiers, some that aren't going back to in-person class, at least to start the year. They might be going back out and doing some Wi-Fi delivery or meals where they have the approval to, or school supplies. So certainly school buses will be running, and they're already up and running across the nation in various places. But it will be interesting to see where the OEMs earlier this year already announced some incentives for COVID-19, like deferred payment. Might we see some other incentives coming along to kind of try to spur things along, try to add some more prompting out there to get more folks buying school buses? We know, though, again, with the budget cuts, a lot of these school bus purchases are probably not a huge priority. As we talk about time and time again, we really need to get the school transportation industry to the forefront of the complete entire educational conversation in communities. And so often it's not, even though we all know what a vital service that it provides. We'll certainly be on top of this topic. In fact, we'll be writing about this fall in our November issue. So I just kind of wanted to let you guys know that and keep your eyes out.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan, for that. And I mean, I read the report too, and what jumped out to me particularly is Phil Horlock said he was particularly pleased with the alternative fuel results, which represented about 48% mix of year-to-date sales and backlog. So we definitely see an increase of share in propane, gasoline, electric-powered buses. So he made those comments, and to me, it jumps out as, here we go, alternative energy, top of mind for many districts as they make these investments. They're looking at these alternatives like propane or gasoline or electric. And what's that trend going to look like into the future here? And I think a lot of it is predicated based on grants and fiscal responsibility to stakeholders at the school district. I mean, Ryan, what are you hearing around the alternative energy space? Anything more there?
Well, yeah, there definitely states are moving forward. There was a big electric purchase up in, I believe it was Minnesota. I know that there's been more VW money in California that was just released. So certainly alternative fuels, they're here to stay. The fact that the federal government is really getting away from the use of alternative fuel because they're really trying to, again, prime the pump there and get folks thinking like, hey, this is no longer an alternative. We have a strong movement, of course, in propane, specifically on the school bus side. You know, electric is coming. That's going to take a little bit longer, of course, because of the upfront costs and the charging infrastructure. There's CNG out there. CNG does not have the foothold that propane has. The Alternative Clean Transportation Expo, the folks actually that put that on, Gladstein, Neandros and Associates. This ACT Expo, by the way, is a really large conference convention convention trade show that normally happens in April, May. They postponed and ended up canceling their in-person conference this year. They're actually going virtual this month. They actually published a paper on sustainability of fuels going forward. And they looked at how propane really is the leader right now. As I mentioned, CNG's fallen basically about 10% or so over the last couple years. Electric, though, is emerging. So certainly, as you said, Tony, this remains top of mind for people. And it's really going to be reliant upon those grant funds, as you mentioned, as long as that money does not get absconded or taken away to deal with COVID-19. We ran an article earlier this summer where we were looking at that. We talked with Joe Anati, who is one of the leaders over there at Gladstein, Neandros and Associates, and he mentioned that it's really important if you don't have your funds yet, but you are on the award list. Don't just sit pat and expect the money to come. You need to be active. You need to be talking to people and making sure that money still is coming. Again, we're seeing good things out there from states, that we're seeing VW money, new rounds flowing, but it just don't rest on your laurels. If you feel that money's coming to you, go after it, find out where it is, and just kind of mind your P's and Q's, if you will.
Yeah, no, sound advice, Ryan. And, here's some other sound advice. We have a handy tech tip brought to you by Zonar, a leader in smart fleet management. Any of your school buses have a Cummins engine? Anybody? Cummins offers its vehicle diagnostics free through factory-installed Zonar telematics. Plus, drivers can use the free Zonar OT Air mobile app to update that engine themselves anytime, anywhere. No cost, no mechanic, no in-person handoff. Check your Cummins agreement for details. You could have new fleet tech under your hood. Learn more at zonarsystems.com/OTAir. That's zonarsystems.com/OTAir. All right, Ryan, we had a few reader podcast emails come through. You want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, actually, the last time I was here, episode 19, which was a couple weeks ago, I was discussing the economy. Specifically, I was going through the Republican-led HEALS Act, which was an attempt to rectify with the Democrat plan, the HEROES Act that was announced back in July, on how to basically ramp up this next stimulus package dealing with expiring unemployment benefits and whatnot. A reader responded, took a little bit of umbrage with my opening comments, felt I was a little too negative, maybe misconstrued what my point was trying to be, was that it felt like years since the unemployment and the economy was where it had been just a few months ago, and kind of thought that I was insinuating that the economy had been going poorly for a while. Obviously not. Back in February, those last unemployment numbers for that month before, of course, COVID took over our lives in March, 3.5% unemployment. That, along with that same percentage in December and November of 2019, and before that, September of 2019, that was the lowest it's been since 1969. Pretty amazing. So certainly the economy has been motoring along, and then this COVID-19 hit and really took all the wind out of the sails. So ever since then, of course, we've been trying as a world and as a nation to try to dig ourselves out and figure out how we can do that. Now, certainly, unemployment skyrocketed to 14.7% in April, but it has been coming down slowly but surely. Encouraging news last week when unemployment claims dropped below 1 million for the first time since the pandemic began. So that is very good news. But still, there's a lot of folks out there that are still out of work. And last week, Congress, they went on their August recess without finalizing this most recent stimulus package. Of course, President Trump signed an executive order almost 2 weeks now ago that's set to kind of bypass that and get them back to the negotiating table by extending unemployment benefits, at least temporarily, and cutting payroll taxes. But that was supposed to be retroactive to August 1st. Department of Labor actually put out a memo last week saying that money actually probably won't start flowing for the next couple of weeks. So probably we're looking at September September timeframe. And, President Trump had put in his executive order for $400 additionally each week on the unemployment checks. Of course, the Democrats are looking for $600. The Republicans came back and said $200. President Trump kind of met them in the middle, but $300 would be provided by the federal government. His plan would have states ponying up $100 per person. A lot of states immediately said, hey, that's not possible with all the budget deficits and everything that we're running. So a lot going on right there. We know that it looks like things will be standing pat for the next week or two. Once Congress gets back in, we'll have to see. Hopefully they can get their act together and make something positive happen. Meanwhile, kind of on that politics front, and I know it's never a fun place for us to wade in, but there's a lot of politics going on. We want to, of course, when we do talk about politics, bridge the gap and say, how does this affect student transportation, right? So obviously, a lot of folks in education are out of work right now still, but also too, this week, the Democratic National Convention kicked off in Milwaukee. I took a moment to look back at basically a proposal that Joe Biden, who is the Democratic candidate for president, released with Senator Bernie Sanders. They did that last month. And it's essentially 110 pages of talking points in advance of the Democratic National Convention this week. As I was going through there, it really focuses on climate change, criminal justice reform, the economy, of course, education, healthcare, and immigration. And in terms of education as well as climate change, school buses are mentioned several times. Page 3 of the manifesto states the aim of transitioning the entire fleet of 500,000 school buses to, quote, American-made zero-emission alternatives within 5 years, unquote. So, Tony, kind of back to what we were talking about earlier with alternative fuels. Now, certainly 5 years transitioning the entire fleet, we know that's not going to happen. These are political talking points, right, in advance of the convention. But that's certainly a very main goal of the Democratic National Party. It's on page 3. But again, we have to be real. How are we going to pay for this? Ostensibly, as the paper goes on to say, it would happen through investments in grant programs and loan guarantees to U.S. manufacturers. Again, it said American made, so we're talking about American companies here. It also mentions kind of beyond the climate change side. It talks about extending Department of Homeland Security sensitive locations provisions that restrict immigration enforcement to extend to areas near schools and school bus stops. So again, we'll have to see how this goes. If Biden and Harris ticket, of course, Joe Biden named Kamala Harris, Senator Kamala Harris, as his vice presidential candidate. If they win in November, a lot of political pundits are either expressing fear or glee that a slew of COVID-19 related stimulus packages will follow. Obviously, they have a pretty broad wish list here of other things they want to get to. But again, we need to remember that the U.S. national debt as of August 14th, I believe, was $26.5 trillion and counting. So again, a lot going on in there, a lot of reasons for optimism, but again, a lot of reasons to be pragmatic, and we need to be realistic.
Yeah, I do appreciate the fact that they're giving school transportation some kudos in this proposal. I hadn't read that yet, but, I'm learning something new on our own podcast. Look at that. So, that's, 500,000 electric vehicles. That would be aggressive, right? And zero emission alternatives. So that leaves it to be, engine manufacturers like Cummins or Roush CleanTech or any of the electric providers. I'm sure they would move very quickly to try to reach that zero emission kind of goal to be part of that opportunity. So all our manufacturers in the engine business, and then also Detroit Diesel, they're in the space now too. So we've got a lot of different powertrain partners that are in the market, and I'm sure they'll have a comment to this sort of thing if it does come to pass. What could that be? So yeah, Ryan, as students go back to classes, what are we seeing in terms of child COVID-19 cases? Because we're starting to see some schools turn on. School busing is starting again. Where's that at right now? Can you give us an update?
So a lot of the conversation this past spring and summer has centered on children largely or thought to be largely immune to COVID-19. Certainly, that does not seem to be the case as more studies are coming out from around the world. But it certainly seems that most children, anyways, don't seem to have as severe symptoms as a lot of adults do, and certainly older adults and those with underlying health conditions. Well, the American Academy of Pediatrics came out with a study last week. It says that childhood COVID-19 cases rose by 90% between July 9th and August 6th. Out of 49 states reporting, along with New York City, District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and Guam, 9.1% of all available cases, some 4.2 million, were children. It wasn't a surprise that most of the cases are in California, them leading the way with nearly 50,000, and followed by Florida, Arizona, and Illinois. But what was most surprising is that the next most states were Tennessee, Georgia, and North Carolina. All these states reported over 15,000 cases. South Carolina was on the heels of its neighbor to the north with about 12,000. 8 states and D.C. reported less than 1,000 child cases. Something else that stood out to me is that the states that reported the largest overall percentage of children with COVID-19 were states that a lot of us think of as being pretty rural and not having the number of COVID-19 cases, and that have been deemed safe to reopen, and a lot of them have started up school in person. Wyoming, Tennessee again, New Mexico, Alaska, South Carolina, and North Dakota. It really gives you pause when you see essentially every large urban school district in America, besides the largest, New York City, going to remote-only learning. And the fact that a school district in Georgia, which made the news a couple weeks ago, where a student there took a picture of a crowded corridor and showing all these kids packed together. She was subsequently suspended from school and made national headlines, and they walked that back, and she was no longer in trouble. But that school district, that county school district, it saw like a huge increase in the first week of school of students that came down with COVID. I think one of the school nurses quit. So really, we are finding our way through this thing still, and we're trying to find that balance of being realistic amid this global pandemic of what is really possible and what's safe to do. So, and of course, we find school buses right in the middle of that.
Yeah, Ryan, safety is definitely top of mind for everybody. And this week's safety tip is brought to you by Safety Vision. You know, every day we see the news that one of parents' top concerns is safety on the school bus. Help put your communities at ease with Safety Vision's infrared thermometer. Parents will feel much better and safer knowing that all of the children are being screened while on board the bus. The device requires no driver interaction, and it is built for student transportation's environment. For most districts, school is just around the corner, so contact Safety Vision at 800-880-8855 or email schoolbussales@safetyvision.com. Go to safetyvision.com to receive pricing and details ASAP. Want to welcome our next guest to the podcast, Antonio Civitella, President CEO of Transfinder. Welcome to the podcast, Tony.
Hey, Tony. Great to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, you know what? We have a big announcement. Transfinder is signed on as one of our diamond sponsors at the upcoming Bus Technology Summit. And Tony's going to be providing a CEO tech talk on the future of tech and where we're headed. Tony, you want to give us a little glimpse of maybe what you're going to be talking about?
I sure will. We're so excited to be part of the Bus Technology Summit that's coming up shortly. We obviously all know that safety issues are what keeps everyone up at night, especially me, and I'm sure you guys too. And of course, our entire career here at Transfinder is to help school district have great routes, safest, make sure kids get to school safe. Of course, even meal deliveries and all those things, that it's all part of the peace of mind. So we actually created a peace plan. And you'll hear a lot more about this during my session, but we actually spell out the word peace plan, starting with P for planning. Obviously, routing system lets you plan routers, combine all that artificial intelligence, all that, so you plan your routes. E is for execute. It's one thing about now you have your plan. Now you got to make sure you're executing. You simulate your plan. You give your route sheets to your drivers. Maybe you have an app or navigation device on your vehicle, so it's all part of the executing. Another one is part of the E of the piece is accountability. Want to make sure that you're reviewing it. Want to make sure that you're looking at, if you have GPS, are you analyzing what you planned? compared to what your drivers are actually doing. That's all part of the accountability. And maybe you need to make some adjustments to maybe your routes and maybe your drivers and so forth. Get some feedback, of course. Then the other big part of the piece is the C, is the communication. And that's communicate. A good way to not only to communicate to drivers and the staff, but communicate to parents and make sure that you have a good plan with that, especially what's going on today. And of course, the last one is examine. The whole part is this is really a life cycle that you want to make sure that you examine your plan. Just keep doing it. So we're going to go more in detail during the session. So I'm excited about that. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And, here at STN, we're really excited about the Bus Technology Summit. With in-person conference opportunities for training, it's kind of like evaporated. Everybody is kind of like, what do we do? Where do we get training? So this new platform that we've invested in really gives our readers, subscribers, listeners like you, School Transportation Nation, the opportunity to dial into what we're doing with tech. So you can learn more at BusTechSummit.com. You'll be able to network with peers. You hear from different suppliers like Transfinder about their latest and greatest, like their new product Plus. You can also meet new people that you've never met before. The system has an ability to kind of match you together with other peers within the market. It's really sophisticated what this thing can do. I'm really kind of jealous. I'm like, hey, I want these features and functions in my live conferences too. So I think it's going to be a unique experience you can't afford to miss. And plus, it's free. So you definitely can't afford to miss that price. So definitely, again, log on, check us out, BusTechSummit.com. Thanks a lot to Tony Civitella for joining us today and sharing a little bit about the peace plan for his CEO Tech Talk. Next up, I'll be interviewing Terry Penn from Rockwall ISD, Director of Transportation. Hey friends, joining us today is Terry Penn, Director of Transportation at Rockwall Independent School District. Terry, I hear you're a fan of the STN podcast.
I am, Tony. And first of all, thank you for the invitation for your show. This is really exciting. I know these are tough times for everybody, and I hope the listeners really gain a lot of information for what we might have to share today. But yes, thank you again for the invitation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to dive right into it with you. I know we chatted briefly before the podcast, and you gave me so much amazing information on all the unique things Rockwall's doing to prepare for the school year and some of the in-person things you have planned, maybe. We hope, fingers crossed, right? So maybe you want to enlighten our listeners a little bit on kind of what it took to get prepared, why Rockwall is game time ready for in-person school startup.
Sure. Well, something told me and told most of the administrators here at our district back in April that we had a potential problem around the corner starting in August. And so most of our planning started at that point in time. And the most important thing, and I hope that the listeners kind of understand that while a lot of this time has already gone by, one of the best things that we could do is just immerse yourself in information, gather as much information as you can, Zoom meetings, webinars, podcasts, subscribe to read the news, the stories, the opinions, conducting surveys, getting as much information as you can from your stakeholders, from your parents, from your employees, from your community, and understand what those expectations are and concerns are. And then from there, dealing with whatever the government is doing and decisions that they're making over a period of time, then you're able to draft plans and or set up ideas as to what you're trying to accomplish. So that's what we did. And now we're here today. And as of today, I think effective today, we're still planning on starting school on time at August the 26th. And given no other concerning measures and or decisions, then we'll be ready to go here in transportation.
So it was my understanding, though, that the administration had surveyed the parents on which way they wanted to go, if it was going to be, in person or distant learning or hybrid. You want to kind of enlighten us how that kind of affects transportation?
Sure, absolutely. We started back in June with some parent surveys. We've had 3 surveys now with parents and employees. And we've asked the parents essentially what their expectations were. What did they prefer? from that time frame, looking ahead into August and September, what they thought their children what would best suit them from a learning environment. Would that be online learning, virtual, or would that be in person, or maybe some hybrid of both? And so from those surveys, we were able to come together with some of the limitations that were placed from other sources, i.e. wearing masks, PPE, social distancing, things of that nature. We were able then to draft some schedules where the parents could have a choice as to what they wanted come August 26.
What did you guys decide in terms of the social distancing on school buses? Because there's been much debate over what to do and what's the best practice. What did you guys land on as the best solution at Rockwall?
Sure. So our best solution was one of where we would put a child in every seat of the bus. And our size buses equates to 26 students. Of course, there may be an exception with a sibling that might ride together. But from just a routing perspective, 26 maximum load, and we'd get them to school quicker. And then we had protocols, cleaning protocols, sanitizing protocols that would follow that to ensure the parents of the next group of students that we would transport, that bus was properly sanitized and that we were trying to provide the best clean, safe service that we possibly could.
Can you expand on that a little bit? What's kind of the intervals? What are you using for cleaning? What does that look like? Who's doing it? Are you doing the drivers? Is your maintenance staff? How often? Give me a little more color on that.
Sure. So our model calls for a nightly electrostatic spray down of each bus, and that's in a controlled environment. So once the bus is down from the route, then we'll get on board, we'll spray it down, we'll tape the door for the inspectors to know that that bus has been properly sprayed and cared for. And then when the driver comes into work for the next morning, they know too that their bus has been properly sanitized. So they get on board, fired up, they make their first run. We've built into our routes enough deadhead time where we can then, after that first load of students is dropped off at campus, then that driver will settle down and do a sweep of the bus with the high touch areas, the back of the seats, the windows, the rails, that sort of thing, with a sanitation product we're using, is a Virex. It's a well-known product in the school business. And then they'll conduct their next round of routes, and then when they return to the bus barn, we'll go back in and do another electrostatic spray on the bus and follow that same routine that we do at night, so that when the driver comes back in the PM run, then it's the same as it was in the AM run. So we repeat that again, and then in the PM, before everybody leaves for the night, we'll start it all over again.
Got it. Well, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, there's been a big debate too about hand sanitizer on the bus. I mean, where do you guys fall on the hand sanitizer debate?
So we chose to go ahead and provide hand sanitizer for the students. It's an alcohol-based product. It's a foam-based product, and we mounted hand sanitizers at the entrance of the door, and we're going to ask politely that the students use the hand sanitizer upon entering the bus, as well as a face covering as they enter the bus for the entire bus ride to school.
Very good. And I know when we were talking previously, you mentioned that, the students' parents had the option to opt for in-person or virtual or even hybrid. How's that affecting your projected ridership? What's that look like?
So the numbers are down, surprisingly. My first fear was, when we were planning, that with 26 students on board, we normally carry 40, 50 students per route. And if we have dropped that number back to 26, then my concern was that we would not have enough assets or enough drivers to be able to facilitate all of the attending students. And just the opposite has happened. So we've had, of our student body, we've had roughly about 30% that's chosen virtual study. And then on top of the 70% that will walk into school on that first day, a significant number of those have chosen to make their way to school by other means. So parent will either take them, or they'll carpool, or they'll walk, or whatever other mode of transportation they choose, but they're not riding the bus as of now. So our numbers are down, surprisingly, as I mentioned. And on the high school side of things, it's a little different, that we did go with a hybrid model for our high school students, which calls for, if they choose a walk-in over virtual, if they choose a walk-in, then they will actually attend school for 2 days a week, and they will finish up the rest of the week. If they are in the alphabet from A to M, let's say they will attend Monday and Tuesday in the classroom. They'll go virtual for Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. The other half of the student body then will do virtual Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and they will go into the classroom on Thursday and Friday. So what that ended up doing was cutting the number of students at the high school in two as well. So we ended up with a huge reduction of writing students for the high school level.
Well, Terry, it sounds like you could be a professional juggler with all that, moving around, trying to manage all those students, doing all those various things. Are you looking at technology to kind of support those challenges and really assist you in being able to facilitate all that variation?
It took technology to pull it off, quite frankly. I don't think a medium to large size district can do what we need to do right now without the aid of technology. That's just kind of one of those things that you kind of learn the hard way. If you don't have it, I would advise a listener to think seriously about it, because it just cuts a lot of man hours out of their work of having to build routes and having to change scenarios in midstream and then having to plan differently. For an example, to accommodate what we've been able to accommodate so far for this school year, we rewrote every single route we had, and we had to do that in order to match the riders that had chosen to ride. So it would be very difficult, if not impossible, given the time constraints, to be able to pull something like that off without technology. So I'm a big fan of technology. I think that it's really an area of help for the transportation industry. I think that there's been a lot of technology addition to our industry recently, and I'm really looking forward to that improving and providing us with just additional help in the near future.
Do you want to, give our listeners a sense, how many buses are you running and what does that technology stack that you're using look like? Is that GPS, routing software, Wi-Fi? Give me the quantity of buses and maybe how many students you typically move.
So we've got 100 buses that run every day. Of that 100 buses, we're taking about 6,000 students to and from their home and school every day. But more importantly, we transport about 3,000 students in the middle of the day to their career and college and career academy schools and their other functions that they're participating in throughout the day, and getting those kids back and forth to wherever they need to go before their ride home. So we're using technology to do all of that. So absolutely, as I mentioned before, we run routing software to be able to accommodate that. We have to have field trip software to be able to manage the requests for field trips that occur on an annual basis. We run somewhere in the neighborhood of about 4,000 field trips annually. That can get very busy, particularly if it interferes with your route time. We have GPS on the buses. We have a new digital radio system on the buses. We have remote viewing camera systems on the buses. So we have almost every aspect of digital technology that can be applied to a bus. We're very interested in that, and we're using a lot of it.
Now, I know there's been a big discussion around contact tracing. Are you doing student ridership to perform contact tracing?
Yes, we are. So that was another thing that we had to look at and we had to consider, because we had not done that in the past. So we are definitely gearing up to make that happen as well. And we should be able to accommodate, any concerns that we might have if a student gets sick and it's reported to us, then contact tracing would definitely be available from a school bus route.
Excellent. Well, having all that technology definitely costs money. So you must have done a great job coordinating with your administration and sharing the value of that technology. Can you share kind of like what was your strategy to get your administration to give you funds to invest in all that great tech?
Good question. We're very fortunate in our community. We have a certain level of wealth that the citizens bring to the community, and so they have a real good understanding, a baseline of what technology can do for a government entity, for a school district, for a municipality. They understand that. They're supportive of that. So in a growing community as Rockwall is right now, we're growing about anywhere between 5 to 8% a year. And when you have that kind of numbers that keep increasing your student body, increasing your enrollment, then you have to have a considerable amount of support from the community to be able to accommodate new buildings, new buses, new technology, and that sort of thing. So we've been fortunate to have that. So our administration understands those needs, and we're as transparent as we can be when it comes to our needs, and we're efficient as we can be when it comes to our needs. So I think when the public sees that, when the administrators recognize and communicate that, it just makes it a little easier for everybody to be on the same page as it relates to the funding.
Great. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And, what's next on your list? What are you going to buy next in the toy box to add to your fleet? Anything on your on your wish list here?
I think Wi-Fi is right around the corner. That's the one thing that we do not have right now that I think that we have had some discussion in that area. I think we'll be seriously looking at some form of updating our buses with Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi, very good. And then in terms of buses, are you buying new buses or are you supplementing with, used vehicles? I know there's been a lot of discussion that I've had out in the industry with folks saying, hey, if school starts up and I need more buses using social distancing, how am I going to get those and get those quick? Has that been something that you guys have discussed?
Well, it was one of our options. That was something that we did look at, and I did provide the information of what that might be if we had to scale back our ridership. So that was thought of and that was looked into. But as everyone I'm sure understands, it's not easy to go out and buy a new bus with respect to the delivery and the building. And if everybody does it, it just delays that even longer. So the used market is certainly a viable option. And I think that if you don't look at that used market, you're kind of cutting yourself short. But certainly buying new buses is necessary. We had already had buses ordered in the middle of the year before all this kind of started, and we had delivery this summer. So we were lucky. We just kind of had it already planned and it was already in our lap. So we didn't have to do any real consideration with asset updating. But that is something that I do know that a lot of districts are having to work with and they're concerned with right now.
Any last thoughts that you have for districts that are preparing for that in-classroom or hybrid kind of model? Anything you would leave them with to give them confidence that, hey, school transportation is going to do the job to get it done? What's that last bit of parting advice?
Yeah, so, we are charged by the parents to take care of and provide a safe environment and a safe travel for their children. And we're going to do everything we can in our power to get that done. And that safety is up the top of the list as it comes to that. So as we look at the future and the unknown is staring us in the face and we're trying to make critical decisions and we're trying to move forward, you can't go wrong by looking up, keeping your head up, keeping a good attitude about it, be willing to tackle any kind of problem that you might have, and, just continue to do your research and your planning and try to look ahead and be ready for the next problem that may exist around the corner. I think that's the best thing that we can do given the times and the circumstances that we're under right now, because we don't know what's about to happen. We don't know if the school's going to close, if we're going to have a lot of drivers out sick and it's going to be hard to provide the service. We don't know what that's going to look like. So try to plan, be ready, think through that, have a plan in place where if you do have 20 drivers out sick and it's going to impact your ability to serve the kids in a serious way, then have some kind of a backup plan where you can at least service the students with their needs.
Wonderful advice. Thank you for coming on the podcast. And since you're such a big tech user, I definitely want to extend a personal invitation to our Bus Technology Summit. I know Antonio Civitella, who was on the podcast earlier, I believe you used Transfinder's routing software. I'm sure he'd love to see you on the Bus Tech Summit. So you're more than invited to join up with us. It's free too, so why not?
Tony, I will be there. I would encourage the other listeners to tune into this. This is really going to be a great opportunity to learn, some of the new technology that's out there and some of the ideas that everybody's having. And a special thanks out to Tony. Antonio, he's done a great job with his organization and his products. And yes, we are a Transfinder user. We love it. We have just about every module that he has out there on the market. And we really think that's the answer to Rockwall's transportation concerns.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining us today, Terry. Thanks again to my co-host, Mr. Ryan Gray, and to our wonderful sponsors, Transfinder, Zonar, and Safety Vision. Friends, thanks for tuning in today. You can access all this content and all other episodes of the podcast online on the website. You can also go to Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. We love 5-star reviews, so don't forget to leave those. And be sure to email us. We'd love to talk about topics that are important to you. Email us at info@stnmedia.com. That's info@stnmedia.com. Reach out anytime. We're here for you. Also, go to stnonline.com for the latest in news and perspectives on school bus, coronavirus, and school startup. We'll see you next time.